think you can, yeah, you can start.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from different places. Mingalaba. So
Good evening,
today,
sir.
good evening. So today, I would like to introduce our speaker, Stephen Heath. So we call him Steve. Yes. So Steve was an academic manager at the University of Queensland, where one of his responsibility was coordinating the International Diploma in Language Teaching Management, IDLTM, from 1995 to 2015. Since 2015, Steve has continued to be involved in teaching and training for directing the IDLTM, occasional ESOL teaching, and pre-session academic English for theory, postgraduate students in Myanmar. Steve was an IELTS examiner trainer for a number of years and previously taught in England, Nigeria, Malta, Malaysia, and Brunei. He is a recipient of the English Australia IELTS Award for Academic Leadership and holds an MA from the University of Birmingham. Today's topic is moving into ELT management, adapting to a new identity. Okay, so Steve, now the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miet, for that welcome. And I should say Mingalaba to everyone. Thank you for joining the session this evening. Just to let everyone know that I'm in Brisbane, Australia, and the time here is 10:30 at night. 11 o'clock is normally my bedtime. So if I start to look a little bit sleepy, then please forgive me. But hopefully I'll stay awake. I've had a few coffees today, so I should be okay. But thank you again for the invitation to speak to you. And I hope that you can hear my voice and that you can understand what I am saying. Is it quite clear? Are you receiving the sound?
Yes.
Yes. Thumbs up? Okay, excellent, good. Okay, well, I'll share my screen with you. And as Miat said, I'm talking about moving into ELT management. Now, I looked at the information that you put in your application or your registration for this event, and I see that there are people from, of course, mainly Myanmar, but also possibly, I don't know whether everyone is here yet, but others from the Philippines, from Bangladesh, from Vietnam, from Thailand, even from Saudi Arabia, from Colombia. But I'm not sure whether everyone has managed to join. But it's fantastic that Myanmar TESOL has been able to arrange webinars like this. Now, you also put in questions, I noticed, for the session, and we'll perhaps look at these if we have time at the end. But I noted that the questions fall into three categories, really. There are questions about your own personal English language development, which is not something that I'm going to talk about right now. That's perhaps something for another occasion. Then there were questions about teaching and methodology and classroom practice and new developments in ELT and AI and things like that. Lesson planning as well, for example. Someone had a question about lesson planning. Again, I'm not going to deal with those particular questions in this session, but I hope that you'll stay anyway. Those of you who ask those questions will stay and enjoy what I'm saying, and use this as a useful English listening experience if you're wanting to develop your English skills. I had a student once who said, Steve, why am I always getting 5 in IELTS? Why I do this? I talk to everyone I can. I speak to people. I answer questions, but I'm still getting 5. And I said, stop, 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 stop. What you need to do is listen before speaking. And I think there's a tendency with some students who are taking either whether it's IELTS test or Pearson test or any other tests where there's speaking involved, is that in their practice and their preparation, they think that by speaking a lot, they're going to develop their speaking. And that may be true. But more importantly, I think, is listening and reflecting on that listening. So that's just one little thing there that I will mention about teaching. And then the third category, of course, is management. So there are lots of questions too about management, many of which I will be addressing as we go through this presentation. There's one particular question that I haven't addressed, but I might be able to address it at the end if we have time. And that was a question from Yin Mon Sui, if you're here. I'm not sure whether you're here, but anyway. The question was, what are some common mistakes that managers make? Now, I haven't addressed that directly, but it's a good question. And if we have time at the end, I will give some responses to that. Okay, so as part of the introduction, let's think about identity. We'll come back to identity as a specific topic later on in the session. But just to begin, what are you? Are you a teacher or a manager? A teacher or manager? Now I'm just going to here, I think I need to I just want to start a survey here if I can find it. I may need to stop sharing, I think. I'll stop sharing the screen and we'll go to well, I can't find it. I think I don't know whether Mia, you can find the survey, the survey key. Maybe not. Maybe that's only for me. Okay, I'm going to go back. We won't do that then. We'll go back to my slides. That's okay. So, are you a teacher or are you a manager? Or are you both? What is your identity? Are you sometimes a teacher, sometimes a manager? Are you more of a teacher or more of a manager? Or are you neither, perhaps? Neither a teacher nor a manager. Perhaps you have some other role in your school. Now, these are two of my grandchildren, and they're having a little conversation. And I think they're asking each other, what's your job? So one of them is saying to the other, what's your job? And the other one is saying, oh, I'm just a teacher. So what are you? Are you a teacher? Are you just a teacher? And I think the word just, often we use that. And when we use the word just, it makes it appear that, well, I don't really think very much of my work. It's not as high quality or as significant as maybe other jobs are. I'm just a teacher. But actually, if you are a teacher, you're of course very important, and you're probably, apart from the students, the most important people in your school. My identity. We'll come back to this notion of identity towards the end of this session, as I said, but a few words about my identity. So my two main professional interests which impact on my professional identity are these. I was a director of studies or a senior manager at my institute at the University of Queensland, an institute which taught English to international students. And I also ran the IDLTM, the International Diploma in Management, for 20 years. And now I'm still running it, but in a slightly different format. And that's been running since 2022 and still running. So my identity was between the years 1976 and 1995, almost 20 years as a teacher. And that was my professional identity. Of course, I have a wider identity, but my professional identity was as a teacher. And then from 1995 up until 2015, I was an academic manager or director of studies at the University of Queensland. And then I went back to being a teacher again. And I won't say just a teacher, but being a teacher. So the IDLTM course, which I'll talk about later on, is for teachers wanting to go into management. So that's another thing that I do at the moment and continue to do. And there are two teachers from Myanmar who are currently taking the International Diploma in Language Teaching Management course. And I'm not sure if they're here today. Maybe they are, I'm not sure. But they're coming to the end of their 8-month program. They finish in early November. So my other professional interest, apart from as a manager, is as a teacher in Yangon. So every year since 2018, I've been going to Yangon for 1 month each year, the month of March, to teach English at a graduate school of theology. And it's something that I really enjoy doing. I love the students. I love being in Myanmar, and that's now part of my identity as a teacher again. So my presentation about moving into ELT management is all about adapting, evolving, and leading. And this was the theme of a recent ELT conference in Brisbane. In leading, one of the manager's roles is to help their staff adapt and evolve as situations and circumstances change. I had a teacher who we brought in to our institute to teach on Cambridge courses. A very good teacher, very conscientious, came with very good recommendations, and she worked very hard and did a very good job. But after a few years, the Cambridge courses were not gaining enough students to be worthwhile from a business perspective. So we had to stop those courses. And the teacher was this particular teacher who we'd brought in specially for those courses was very concerned. And because that was where she saw her identity as a Cambridge teacher. But I think it's important for a manager to take teachers out of their comfort zone and move them into other areas of work. And so this teacher had a choice, either to leave our institute or to take on a different role. So she decided to stay, and she took on another role as a teacher of general English. And the general English course was at a level which was very similar to FCE, the first certificate, as it was called. And then she moved into becoming a convener on that particular program. But it was a struggle to get her to come to accept that she needed to change. But that's what a leader, a manager leader, needs to do, to be able to help staff see a way forward in their professional career. And in fact, it's said that appropriate challenge leads to workplace satisfaction. To gain real satisfaction from your work, you need challenge. And I think it's important for managers to give that challenge to their staff when they can. And that, of course, enhances well-being too. If a teacher is satisfied with their work, then they feel more comfortable in their life. So as a DOS, a Director of Studies for 20 years, one of my tasks was to lead both willing and unwilling teachers out of their comfort zones, offering them opportunities to evolve professionally, just as my director did with me. So I was able to move into different areas of work because I had a forward-thinking director who was concerned for her staff. We're going on too far here. Let's go back. And through the IDLTM, the International Diploma in Language Teaching Management, with my colleague Andy Hockley, we teach and guide academic managers to understand their role better, helping them evolve and adapt to their new position at the higher end of the organizational chart. So I'll just show you a picture of an organizational chart in case any of you are not sure what it is. It's often called an organogram. And so this is a chart of my old institute where I worked. So I was one of the senior academic managers. So we have at the top the director, 2 directors of studies, and then down here, assistant directors of studies, ADOS. Below that, coordinators. Below that, conveners. These are all language teachers in these bottom 2 rows here. They're all language teachers. And I think that was important in giving language teachers responsibilities so that they slowly adapt and move into areas of management, or where they discover that perhaps, no, management is not for me. I want to teach. I want to be in the classroom. But having the possibility of those different layers of management, I think is useful and beneficial for teachers. So this one here, of course, an organogram, it's very hierarchical in the way it's laid out here. There are different ways. We can turn it on its side, we can turn it upside down, and to give a different perspective on the structure of the organization. This is something that we talk about on the IDLTM course. So, moving on to the bridge. There's a gap that exists between teaching and management. And a course of study such as the IDLTM can be the metaphorical bridge that overcomes the gap, that helps to establish the identity of an academic manager by helping new managers develop an understanding of relevant management concepts and management practices, and a language with which to talk about management. For example, when we think of words like quality, professional development, organizational culture, customer journey, span of control, break even, SWOT analysis, engagement. All of these are terms which are used by managers to talk about their work with teachers. And then academic management practices too, such as teacher observation, resource allocation, performance appraisals, and helping teachers to develop management and leadership skills. For example, how do we give feedback? How should we delegate? How do we deal with conflict? And so on. And also to access tools that enable them to carry out their management tasks effectively. So a bridge, of course, carries people both ways. It's not just a one-way, it's not just for one-way traffic. A bridge carries people both ways. So it doesn't mean that once crossed from teaching to management, you can't go back, whether periodically or more permanently. For me, I started off as a teacher, went into management, and went back to teaching. And there are challenges in that. There are challenges in going both ways. Teaching to management and management back to teaching. But one thing that I did, and was a policy of my organization, was that managers would teach. Academic managers also must teach. And I was very glad of that. So I would teach 1 or 2 lessons per week to keep in touch with students and with teachers and what they were doing in the classroom. And I'll come to that notion later on as well. But there is a period of ambiguity and uncertainty when you're between 2 positions, going into a new position, being on the threshold between one defined state, one clear state, that is the state of teacher, and another, the state of manager. And that being on the threshold, being between 2 jobs, between 2 spaces in time, is referred to as liminality. Liminality, the state of being in between, which of course can lead to anxiety and perhaps something of an imposter syndrome. You know, thinking, do I belong here? Should I be in this position? Am I ready to be a manager? So anxieties can be part of that process. So let me introduce the topic of managing with this quote from one of our past IDLTM candidates. So when I say IDLTM, remember I'm talking about the International Diploma in Language Teaching Management. So this was from, as I say, from a guy called Kyle Smith from Queensland, who wrote in a pre-course application this paragraph. This was part of an essay. Said, I hadn't considered it possible, but my first 6 months as DOS, Director of Studies, were even more awful than my first 6 months as a teacher. Oh dear. But I kept going, telling myself constantly to just keep getting things done. I kept getting things done, all kinds of things which I had not been expecting to have to deal with when I applied for the job, many of which were unpleasant and extremely challenging. Very gradually, however, I started to develop a new identity, academic manager. So while this sounds rather negative, let me assure you that given the right school, the right colleagues and programs, the role of manager can be immensely satisfying. Challenging, yes, but for me, only occasionally unpleasant. So what are these things, these tasks that an academic manager needs to get done and that lead to a new identity? What are the things that a teacher doesn't expect they will have to do as an academic manager? What are the unpleasant and extremely challenging parts of the job? The writer here doesn't elaborate on these, but I'm sure maybe there are some academic managers or school principals here in this webinar who have their own stories of challenging situations, challenging experiences as a manager. Of course, most managers probably are not dismayed or discouraged by the requirements of their job or the nature of the people they're working with. But there will certainly be challenging situations and perhaps a few unpleasant things, maybe a few unpleasant people that have to be dealt with. So he says, I kept getting things done. I kept getting things done. So what are these things? You'll see at the bottom of the screen, the Luthans, Fred Luthans, 1988, was a prominent writer on management, management professor. He broke down the major activities that managers do into 4 broad areas: communication, traditional management, networking, and human resources management. Now, 1988, you might think, gosh, that's a long time ago. Surely, haven't things changed? Surely, isn't it different now? Actually, no. As another management professor says, a guy called Professor Henry Mintzberg, who I like a lot, I think he's very good in his writing. He's an authority, a researcher, a writer on management over many decades. He said, management hasn't changed in 100 years. Why? Because it's a fundamental human activity. It's not a scientific activity that evolves over time, but rather it's something that everybody does. Everybody's involved in management in some way or other, in whatever job that they're in. So these are the 4 major activities and the tasks associated with them. And I'll come on to those in a moment. So there are, of course, different dynamics, different challenges for managers in different kinds of organizations, but essentially the activities in a very broad sense are the same. They represent the broad spectrum of roles a manager needs to play in whatever sphere of work. So, communication, exchanging information, ensuring that people know what they need to know. Today, perhaps not paperwork, but email and spreadsheet work. But basically, it's the same kind of thing. Traditional management. Managers then and now need to plan, make decisions, and control to some extent what goes on in the workplace. Today, though, I'd like to think that there's more emphasis on support rather than control. So that might be one change today, but there needs to be an element of control from managers, but also we mustn't forget support. Networking. So not only inside your department, but perhaps with the wider organization of which the school is a part. For in my case, my institute was part of a university. And so it was important to be able to network with colleagues in the wider sphere. But also networking with professional bodies. Myanmar TESOL, for example, being involved in Myanmar TESOL at conferences and seminars. And then it mentions politicking. This means making sure the manager gets the resources they need. The resources they need, not just for themselves, but for their staff. Pushing forward their agenda, making sure that they get the resources that they need. So networking. And then a really important area, and perhaps the biggest area in many ways, is human resources management. So dealing with staff, making sure they're motivated and engaged, so important. Reinforcing the good work they do. Disciplining, dealing with conflict, ensuring there are sufficient and appropriate staff for the work that needs to be done, for all those classes that need to be taught. And of course, providing training and development for your staff, for teachers. So it should be ongoing development of teachers. So these four areas can best be seen in terms of the manager's responsibilities or duties. So looking specifically at educational program management, we can identify 9 areas representing the different roles an academic manager is maybe required to take on in their workplace. So academic management, firstly, and this is what you would expect. But what would you expect to include in academic management? What would you expect to include? Would anyone like to say? Just shout out. What does it include? Academic management. What actually is involved?
I think the courses, syllabus, curriculum designing.
Yep, all of that. Yes, good. Yep. Course planning, assessment, teaching. And as a manager, of course, you're not necessarily doing all of these things yourself, but ensuring that they get done. You may be able to delegate to senior teachers, to a coordinator, perhaps, to get those done. The next one, business management. What does this involve? Anyone like to suggest? Business management.
To get profit.
Okay, it's about profit, isn't it? Making a profit for the business. Yeah. As teachers, of course, teachers often are very find it hard to sort of justify the business side of the operation. They may not understand it, and that's why.
To know about, sorry, to know
Yeah.
about debit and credit balance sheet like that.
Yeah,
To know about
absolutely.
debit and credit balance sheet like that, business management
Yeah.
is responsibility.
Yep. Yep. It's about monitoring student numbers and profitability, about doing costing and budgeting. Maybe not dealing directly with finance as an academic manager, but understanding how budgeting and so on work in your organization. And when the finance people are talking about money, you understand the language. When they're talking about money matters, you understand the language, the jargon of finance. And then resources management. What would you expect to include here? Resources management.
Resources can be 2 things, I guess. It will be our teachers and
Yep.
staff, and as well as the materials we have in the school.
Okay, so you mentioned teachers, yes, as a resource. Yeah, okay. We'll come to people in a moment, though. But yes, so the other things, of course, with resources, it means that it's about selecting and procuring the resources that you need, allocating and maintaining teaching materials. It's about classroom furniture and equipment, making sure teachers and students have the equipment they need, that they have the technical equipment, the computers that they need, and so on. Entrepreneurial and customer relations is also an important aspect of a program manager's job. So this is about looking to the future and asking the question, what is it we need to be doing? And identifying new products, new courses. Is there a gap in the market? And it's about monitoring customer satisfaction, building relationships with customers. By customers, that could be the student, or it could be the parent, or another client who's sponsoring a student, perhaps. And to understand what kind of courses that they need. So surveys are really important in this. And then the fifth one, managing people. So what would you expect this to include? Managing people. This is a big one. Anyone like to suggest? What would you expect to include in managing people?
Managing the workforce.
Sorry?
Managing the workforce and
Managing the workforce? Yep.
yes, and helping them to develop so that your organization can run better.
Yeah. It's about recruiting staff, inducting them, assigning work, training, mentoring, motivating, problem solving, grievance and conflict handling, terminating staff if necessary, performance management and appraisal. And all of these are similar to Luthen's human resources management that was on the previous slide. And all of these are dealt with on the IDLTM course. And then administration. So this is all about the paperwork, the email work, overseeing the running of day-to-day systems, student registration, for example, timetabling of teachers, student placement, social activities, and so on. Professional leadership. What would this include? Professional leadership. Well, I think the first thing I think here is that it's about demonstrating, as a manager, demonstrating your own technical competence and teaching skills. Teachers need to be able to trust that their academic manager knows what they're talking about. For example, when you're observing teachers and giving feedback, teachers need to be confident that you know what you're doing, what you're talking about, that your experience, you're bringing your experience to bear on the observations that you're giving. And it's about identifying and meeting any training needs of staff, maintaining quality standards in all areas of the organization, advising students, acting as spokesperson on professional matters when you're talking perhaps to outsiders. So professional leadership. And then the final one, diplomatic and representational. Diplomatic and representational. So diplomatic and representational, liaising with clients, participating in institutional policy development, involvement in external professional organizations, and so on. And then corporate leadership. So articulating, being able to talk about the strategic focus and direction, helping develop that strategic focus, that direction for your organization, and allocating and coordinating a range of organizational functions. We saw the organizational chart, the organogram earlier, and one of the educational program manager's role is to make changes perhaps to that organizational chart, to bring in new positions or to remove positions, depending on the size and so on of the organization. So those are 9 areas. Now on the IDLTM course, we ask, at the beginning of the course, we ask participants to describe their job shape. What's your job shape? So we ask them to indicate the percentage of time that they spend on those 9 different areas. That can be quite different depending on their level in the management hierarchy and on the size and nature of the organization. And this is 3 academic managers: academic manager 1, academic manager 2, and academic manager 3. Each one's showing the percentage of time that they spend on those different areas. I've just highlighted in yellow some of the key, what I think are the key areas that these particular managers are working on. So these are new academic managers. They're people who have been on a recent IDLTM course with us. So academic manager 1, for example, 35% of time managing people, 40% on administration, only 5% on academic management, but 10% on professional leadership. Now, academic manager 3, also only 10% on academic management. And this may be because some of those activities, like curriculum development, assessment, and so on, designing materials, maybe that's delegated to other staff, senior teachers. So less time is spent actually on those, what we sort of naturally think of as academic management responsibilities. But there are all these other responsibilities as well. And as you can see, managing people is a key one for all of them. Administration too is quite high, and professional leadership is fairly high as well. And small amounts of time on some of the other areas. You'll notice that business management, academic manager 1 and academic manager 2, no time spent on business management. That's not their role. And in a very large organization, there would be a team of people involved in the business side of the organization. And the same with diplomatic and representational and corporate leadership. That's maybe at a higher level than the role of academic manager. But of course, these percentages may change over time as the organization gets bigger, as it grows. So maybe other people are brought in to take over some of those responsibilities. In a small organization, it's likely that the academic manager will have more of those functions, more of those responsibilities will be taken by the academic manager, because if the organization is small, then it's not possible to have all those different jobs for different people. Okay, so now we go on to look at some of the differences and similarities between teaching and managing. What does a manager do that a teacher also does? What does a manager do that a teacher also does? Can we go into, just take a break here and go into breakout groups? I'll stop sharing and we'll try to go into breakout groups. How many? We've got about 48 people. So if we choose maybe say 12 groups. So you'll be assigned automatically, and we'll see how this goes. So it should be, we might make it a bit less, actually. We'll make it, maybe make it 10 groups. Okay. So when you see on the screen the instruction to join the group, quickly join your group. We'll just spend a few minutes only on this question. So just a reminder of what the question is. What does a manager do that a teacher also does? Or what does a teacher do that a manager also does? what are some of the things in common?
We still can't see the instruction coming up.
Hmm.
Yes, so break
Oh,
out.
yes. Yes, there it is. Yes, got it.
Okay, good.
Hello, teachers.
Hello, teachers.
Have you already contributed?
Not yet, Lisa.
Not
Just
yet.
about.
Yes, Jay.
Right.
So if you have any ideas, you can share.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes as a teacher, we need to manage the time and manage about the lesson plan. Sometimes for me, I'm a little bit difficult to manage my time actually. Because sometimes I want to share so many things for my student, but I'm neglect about the time and sometimes it skip and it over my time, and this is my problem. So actually I need to manage my time. If I have a time to 45 minutes, I have to plan a 45-minute lessons and activities. That's all.
So,
you,
teacher, oh, sorry. How do you think a manager does the planning? How do you think it is similar to a manager, to the tasks of a manager?
Manager.
I think we're talking about the similarities between a teacher and a manager, right? You talk about managing the time. So how do you think an academic manager or a manager would plan and would how do I say that? Would delegate their time according to the tasks?
Actually, if we want to manage the time, first we need to prepare first, I think. We do it first and foremost so we can manage the time properly. And that's just my opinion.
yeah,
Okay.
I agree with you. For me, the comparison of time, that as a teacher, we have to plan accordingly with our lesson plan, as well as a manager, we have to be in the timeline. For example, planning events, programs. So there is a timeline. One to promote the program, one to finish the course. So that's also a time management. Here in our classroom, we have to follow the time. So this is the same criteria, one of the same criteria. Yeah. How about teacher Sue? Do you also have any idea?
Yeah, so I was thinking about managing, monitoring, and administration. I think they are the three areas that both a teacher and a manager do, because just like you mentioned, in the classroom, we have to manage the students, manage the resources. And in the same sense, an academic manager will have to manage the resources, manage people. And another thing is like monitoring. We will monitor the students in the classroom. So a manager would have to monitor the students' progress, the quality, and and the last thing is the administration. As a teacher, we have to check the students' work, record their test score, and see if they have improved. So I think that's the same for the academic manager as well. They have to do some administration stuff.
Yes, teacher.
Yes,
Detail.
that's
So all of the criteria collapse each other, right? So that's why we teachers are one of, in our criteria of as a teacher, we are facilitator. Sometimes we are the manager in the classroom, right?
yeah, right.
How
Yes.
about teacher Zulai? Can you still hear us and do you want to contribute? Okay, teacher must have any connection or something. Okay, so yeah, we got many points. Oh, there's one more teachers coming in. Any other thing, teacher?
Nothing special from now.
Okay, So Teacher Sui has mentioned a lot for all of us. So we'll bring all these ideas. And Teacher Sui, can you please be our representative? Then you present it to Steve our group presentation when it comes to it. Only when it comes to it. Okay. So let's go back to the main section.
Yes, thank you, teacher.
Thank you for your sharing.
Did you have a good discussion? A very brief discussion?
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on then. I won't ask for any feedback on that discussion, but I hope that you were able to come up with a few ideas of things that a manager does that a teacher also does. So the question here is, can a new manager rely on their teaching skills and personal attributes to carry out their management duties effectively? I think the simple answer is yes, but. Yes, but. Many of the skills are similar in management and teaching, but I would say not, maybe not rely on, but draw on. So a new manager can draw on their teaching skills and personal attributes, but they can't rely on those alone. So many of the skills are similar in management and in teaching. For example, a manager needs to be able to plan. So let me just go here. Okay. A manager needs to be able to plan, so does a teacher. Both need to be able to manage their time. An academic manager has familiarity with best practice in teaching and assessment and interpretation of the curriculum. So does a senior teacher. A manager needs to be a good communicator. So does a teacher. Both need to be able to give feedback effectively, to give explanations, to listen and understand what others are saying. A manager needs to be able to deal with conflict. So does a teacher. A manager needs to organize people. So does a teacher, and so on. The difference, of course, is in the context. The difference is in the context. Managing a conflict between two students is quite different from managing a conflict between members of staff. Giving feedback to students is quite different from giving feedback to a teacher, although there are similarities. One of those similarities, I think, is the importance of giving feedback as soon as possible after the event that triggers it. An academic manager not waiting for the performance appraisal at the end of the year. And then promotion from teacher to manager within the organization is usually because the teacher has been recognized as having some of those competencies or skills. However, when they're new in that position, there's a developing realization that in the new context, those skills need to be reimagined. They need to be used differently for the different context. As in the example, the text example I gave earlier, experience in the new role was not at the seamless shift that he thought it would be. If you remember this quote that I used earlier, he said all kinds of things which I had not been expecting to have to deal with when I applied for the job, many of which were unpleasant and extremely challenging. So all kinds of things. So I was going to ask you to talk about this, but I don't think we will. There's a question here. What kind of challenges would you expect to face if you were to be appointed to an academic manager position? So if you're a teacher, what kind of challenges would you expect to have to face? Would anyone like to just mention one or two? What kind of challenges as a teacher do you think you'd have to face?
So as our main profession is teaching, so it's we have to face many challenges. One, we have to manage the centers of skills or manage the teachers or giving the training or making the curriculum design. So there are many challenges. Yeah.
There are. Okay. Okay.
So we have no management experience. Business management is also difficult for the teachers.
Yeah, okay, so you can imagine what the challenges might be. You've seen your own academic managers at work, and you know what kind of challenges perhaps that they have to face. So is there one particular challenge that you, as a manager, those of you who are managers, have faced when moving into a management role? Can you think of your, maybe not your greatest challenge, but a challenge that was significant in moving into that new role? No? Well, let me talk through some challenges. So first of all, there's a challenge because of the change of focus. You know, the question, who am I, comes up. You know, you're changing focus and you're going into this new position. It's a kind of almost an existential question of who am I? But looking at things now from a much wider management or business perspective, when you go into a management role, you're looking at things from this much wider perspective. You're seeing the bigger picture. The academic manager needs to be aware of the wider needs of the school rather than just those in the teacher's class. And you'll be in constant communication with a large number of people on every level of the organization about a wide variety of different issues and topics. Unlike teaching, of course, which involves focusing on a small number of people, but in great detail. And as a manager, you're learning to deal with the conflict between academic quality and financial constraints. You're where the buck stops, rather than being able to pass on difficult problems. So taking on different roles, the role of coach, trainer, counselor, report writer, interviewer, course planner, staff observer and appraiser, conflict manager, and with responsibility for things of a very practical nature: student placement, student welfare, recruiting, holding on to good teachers, and so on. And then the change in status and relationships. If you've moved into a management position within the same school in which you were a teacher, one of the greatest challenges is coming to terms with the change in that relationship with your colleagues. And I think before becoming a manager, this change in relationship is not given very much consideration, if any. But once you start managing people, supervising them, and this can be a significant challenge, taking the leap from being a fellow teacher to taking on a leadership role with those teachers, from being a team member to feeling at times perhaps quite isolated. So managing the changes in colleague perception, you're no longer their friend, you're their boss. And that can be a distinct challenge. Stepping into the middle between students, teachers, and other management staff. When you walk into a classroom as a teacher, the students accept your authority, generally, and see you as someone who will both direct and support them. Whilst this should also apply to management, for a new manager, it may not be the case. And respect for you as a manager may take time, and this can be an unexpected challenge. And then, of course, there's also the relationship with those in a higher position, the CEO, the principal, perhaps. And that relationship also has to be navigated, being sensitive to the personality of your CEO, your principal, and their way of working. And also, you go from being thanked and rewarded by your students and rewarded by their progress, seeing their progress, to a position in which your work may actually be it may appear to be quite unappreciated. And that's a challenge. So then, the third area, learning and using new skills. So, for example, people management, organizational skills, how to deal sensitively with difficult situations, such as dismissing staff or reducing teachers' hours, having difficult performance appraisal conversations, responding appropriately to a mid-career teacher who says, when questioned about non-attendance at PD sessions, as one of my teachers once said, "Oh, Steve, I'm over PD. I've had enough PD. I don't need any more PD." So that's the challenge. How do I, as a manager, deal with that? And there are ways, and I did deal with it, which I won't go into now, but it can be a challenge when you have those kinds of reactions. So now you're a leader with a new identity, but mind the gap. So although there are some skills that can carry over into management from teaching, the challenges suggest that there can be a large gap between teaching and management. So what's needed to bridge the gap are leadership skills. But not all managers, I think, see themselves as leaders, which they should. All managers should be leaders. Here are some quotes that look at the differences between management and leadership. So we're just moving now on to looking more at the leadership aspect of management. Stephen Covey, who's known from his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, says management works in the system, leadership works on the system. In other words, management is working with what you've got. Leadership looks at what can be done differently. A manager administers and maintains what exists. A leader innovates and develops. Peter Drucker, a writer on management theory and practice, once described as the man who invented management, says, Management is doing things right. Management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. What does that mean? I think the manager does what needs to be done and does it well, while a leader looks at what actually needs to be done. There's nothing more useless than doing what doesn't need to be done, even if you're doing it really, really well. While a manager asks how and when, a leader asks what and why. Why are we doing this? Let's step back and think about what it is we're doing and why are we doing it. Questioning the status quo. But I think we need our managers to also be asking the what and why questions. And managers should be given the freedom to ask those questions. So I've spoken about management roles, but leadership is not so much about roles, but about behaviors, attitudes, and personal qualities. This is Henry Mintzberg, and he says, we'll come to this quote in a moment. There's a tendency to contrast management and leadership. We see some people as managers, others as leaders, but I think the differences are actually quite small, and there's a big overlap between the two, or there should be. A good manager needs to be a good leader, and a good leader needs to be a good manager. So Henry Mintzberg says this: managers who don't lead are boring, and leaders who don't manage don't know what's going on. What I think he means is that managers, in a traditional sense, are simply following orders passed down from above, not being in any way creative or forward-thinking about what they do. Leaders, on the other hand, who remain in their top floor executive office, devising plans, devising policies, writing strategy for those lower down in the hierarchy, for them to follow, may simply be unaware of how those policies and so on are being implemented. Separation of leadership and management, Mintzberg suggests, is actually destructive, not constructive, it's destructive. So they're two sides of the same coin, leadership and management. As an academic manager myself, as I said earlier, I always did some teaching as well as those other duties of an academic manager. So I would take on those, those teaching duties that didn't require marking, didn't require very much preparation, because I had a lot of other work to do as well, but it was good to be back in the classroom. Henry Mintzberg has said we need to develop communityship, not to be obsessed by leadership. He says effective organizations are communities of human beings, not collections of human resources. Now, I've referred to human resources earlier, but he suggests that no, we're human beings, not human resources. If we see people as resources to be used as we direct, then we're perhaps not seeing and treating them as part of a community. And schools, after all, are communities, important communities of people working together. So leadership qualities. That's another question for discussion. What are 2 or 3 qualities that you expect in an excellent leader? What are two or three qualities that you expect in an excellent leader? And I'm not talking about political leaders here, because we've seen some awful examples recently of political leaders. We're talking about leaders in professional organizations such as schools. So what are 2 or 3 qualities that you expect? Would anyone like to name one?
Empathy.
Empathy. Wonderful. Yeah. Okay, that's a great one to start with, because this is a word cloud from a conference a few years ago in Australia, where people were asked that same question: what are the attributes of a good leader? one of the qualities of a good leader. Empathy stands out. There is empathy right in the middle. As you were previously a teacher, you can empathize, and even more so if you're still doing some teaching. And then other things, listening actively, leading by example, demonstrating the citizenship behaviors that you want your staff to emulate, to inspire, motivate, empower others. All of those are in that word cloud. So leadership styles. There are various models of leadership, often overlapping in their ideas. Transformative leadership, virtuous leadership, servant leadership, and so on. And this particular one here is emotional intelligence. So this is from Daniel Goleman. So leadership styles based on emotional intelligence. So leaders need to be adaptable to be able to take on any of these leadership styles, these 6 leadership styles, depending on the circumstances. For example, directive, give clear direction when required. If you're in a crisis situation, you need to give clear direction. Be directive. Authoritative. This motivates people to action by creating a shared vision. Affiliative, building bridges, bringing people together. Creates the idea of communityship. Democratic, making decisions democratically. Pace setting, setting high standards for your staff. And coaching, encouraging and developing others. So these are styles of leadership. And the style may come from the kind of personality that the leader has, that the manager has. But that may need to be adapted according to the situation and depending on the staff that you're working with. So 2 more quotes. First one, Simon Sinek. He's an author and speaker on business leadership. He takes another angle. In his book, Leaders Eat Last, he says leadership is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in your charge. And that's the role of the academic manager in regards to teachers. Teachers take care of their students, managers take care of their staff. So it's not about finding fault. And that can be a common mistake that managers make, finding fault in teachers' work, but rather being encouraging. And Brené Brown, in her book, Dare to Lead, says, daring leaders must care for and be connected to the people they lead. Be connected. On the IDLTM course, we use this, 5 ways to be a better leader. And the second one, get to know your team. Know them. Know what as much as you can about them, not just their professional life, but their personal life as well, so that you can really support them in every way and care for them. We won't look at all of these, but I'll just refer to making time. And it's important for leaders to make time. In fact, for everybody, for all of us to make time. How do we do that? How can we make more time? Well, this is it's known as the Eisenhower matrix. And managers need to spend more time in quadrant 2 on this matrix, looking at dealing with the important but non-urgent matters within your organization. Crises, of course, in quadrant 1, they have to be dealt with. You have to deal with a crisis. There's a flood, there's an earthquake, there's some other crisis. A teacher is sick, can't come in to teach. It's a crisis, maybe. But if you've had if you spend more time in goals and planning in quadrant 2, maybe you can start to plan for potential crises. Get rid of the interruptions. They may be important, they may be, interruptions, but they may be urgent, but not important in quadrant 3. Urgent, but not important. Delegate. Pass that on to someone else if you can. Get that person themselves to solve that problem, that issue. Quadrant 4, distractions. Not important, not urgent. Get rid of them. Distractions can be social media. Scrolling through the social media posts, all the feeds that you get, the LinkedIn or whatever social media you use. Don't just ignore it. Don't if a message comes up, don't feel you have to go and respond to it. It's a distraction. So the time that you would have spent, you can spend in quadrant 2 in goals and planning. And then perhaps the crises that come up, you are better prepared for. And in goals and planning, you can spend more time perhaps thinking about your performance appraisal that you're going to do with staff. Think more about the goals you have for your organization and for your teachers, preparing for professional development with your staff, giving more time to those things, which are not urgent at the time, but they're really, really important. Okay, so very gradually, we started to develop a new identity. So professional identity is an aspect of your overall identity that forms as you absorb and adopt your professional community's values. Your professional identity develops as you begin to feel a sense of belonging to this professional group called academic management. But attention may arise when you go into a management position between your teaching identity and your evolving academic management identity. So conflicts between how we see ourselves and what we need to do to fit in to this new role can deeply affect our ability to thrive. I had one assistant director of studies who worked with me for 2 or 3 years, but eventually she was unable to cope with the change in relationship. Previously, she'd been a teacher, she had good relationships, but then becoming a boss, becoming a supervisor, she wasn't able to handle those relationships so well. I had another assistant director of studies who wanted to remain a teacher. She didn't want to relinquish her desk in the teacher's room, and that was an issue for some weeks. We wanted her to move into a management office so that she could have those private conversations with students and with staff, not to be in an open office with other teachers, even though that was what she would have preferred. For me, when I relinquished my management role and went back to teaching, it was a challenge for me joining a staff room, an open staff room, joining the staff that I'd hired, staff whose lessons I'd observed, staff whose performance I'd reviewed, and staff who I might have reprimanded on 1 or 2 occasions. So that was a challenge that you face when you go back into teaching in the same organization. So I posted the question at the beginning, why is professional identity important? If you take on the role of manager, it's important that you see yourself as such and do all you can to understand what that means in the way you carry out your tasks, and particularly in the way you relate to other staff, to your teachers. This will help you earn their respect. And ensure that you're not conflicted in your mind. Any job has its share of stressful situations, but when we feel connected to the professional group that we're in other words, the management group, we're more likely to persevere. We feel great when our professional culture and values align with our core values, those values from our wider social cultural group and community. But if they clash, if those values clash, then we struggle. So it can help to ask yourself these questions. How connected do you feel to your professional community? If you feel well connected, then you've developed that new identity. How much is your professional identity part of your whole self? And how do you describe yourself professionally when introducing yourself to people outside your community? What do you say? Your answers may surprise you. If your connections are positive and there is a balance between all elements of your identity, well done. But if you're feeling uneasy and disconnected from your professional identity and community, it's critical to explore that because it will affect your effectiveness in your job and your emotional well-being. So having your professional identity not conflicting with your wider identity, which maybe comes from your from your family, from your culture, from your religious affiliation. Those are important identities, and it's important that that identity doesn't conflict with your professional identity. So we're getting towards the end. How do we develop that new identity? I think there are a number of different ways we can do that. Experience, just learning on the job, reflecting on our own practice, observing other managers and reflecting on what they do, observing what appears to be done well, and also what appears to have been done badly, and the manner in which things are done, reflecting on those. And reading, of course, reading blogs, books, articles on managing and leading, or from a mentor, having a mentor when you're first in a management position, someone who can be a mentor to you, to walk alongside you, having regular meetings, weekly meetings perhaps. And what I call a graduated approach. So if you remember the organogram I showed you, the organizational chart, where there are different levels of management. So moving from teacher to senior teacher, to convener, to coordinator, to acting assistant director of studies, to assistant director of studies, to director of studies. If there is a pathway like that, then of course that makes it a lot easier to develop that identity as a manager. And then the final thing, study. And so we come to the International Diploma in Language Teaching Management, which I'll just say a few words about, but there is more on the website that you can see for this. So the modules, first of all, the ELT organization. So it's we look at the structure of organizations, the culture of organizations, managing teachers, all those human resource areas. In a sense, teachers manage themselves, but as an academic manager, you provide the structure and the guidance that enables them to manage their own professional selves. The student experience, customer service, the whole journey of the student from registering or finding out about your school to their final exam and perhaps becoming an alumnus. Marketing, marketing analysis and strategy, developing a marketing plan, developing client relationships, finance, understanding profit and loss accounts, balance sheets, fixed and variable costs, break even, and so on. Managing projects, creating and using teams to develop projects. Change management, communicating change and the processes involved in change. So all of these we look at. on the course. And then academic leadership, establishing and maintaining quality, the basis for curriculum design and resourcing. How will learning be assessed? Developing the professional skills of teachers, providing CPD for teachers. So the course is 8 months long, from the next one from the 13th of October. And there are part scholarships available if you apply in writing. So delighted customers. So a couple of comments from recent graduates of the course, which you can read yourself there. Okay, that's a lot of talking, a lot of listening, and I've got time for questions if you have any questions. But I thought I might actually just go to that that one from Yin Monsui, common mistakes managers make. I did allude to one or two there, I think. But I think if I can just say very briefly some common mistakes. Firstly, not including teachers in decision making. Being overly critical, looking for weaknesses rather than focusing on strengths. Favoritism, favoriting one or two teachers over others. The 80-20 principle, where you give 80% of the work to 20% of the staff. Why? Because those staff they're keen, they're interested, they're involved, and you use them more and more and more. Draw on other staff. Don't fall into the trap of this 80-20 principle, giving 80% of the work to 20% of the people. Not delegating effectively is another mistake. Another mistake, not saying thank you enough. Of course, there are cultural aspects to this as well. And in Myanmar culture, and I know in some Asian cultures, it's not perhaps so common to say thank you too frequently. But I know in my context, one of my staff told me off once for not thanking them enough. And it's good, I think, to thank them, even for the job they're doing. They're not doing anything special, just doing their job. Thanking them for that. And so I think, yeah, I think those are some of the mistakes. Okay, so thank you for listening. You've done a lot of listening. I've done a lot of talking. But if there is any burning question that anyone would like to ask, please feel free. It is now. Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation, which is really enlightening and insightful. Thank you very much. So my question is regarding the course that you have talked about, the International Diploma in Language Teaching Management. Okay, so and here in this audience, some people are already running their own schools and they are already entrepreneurs. So what about people who are just interested in start up? Okay, so they have no experience of managing. They are still not very experienced. So is this course suitable for those people with very what you call still in the very early stage of the career?
Right. I don't know whether is Chosu here. Chosu is one of the candidates on the IDLTM, and Zinzin as well. I think maybe they're both here.
I saw Zinzin, but she's not here anymore. I think I saw her.
Okay.
Yes, Sissy and Tosu. Yes, they are
I'm
here.
here. I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh,
I yeah, I am currently attending the ELTM course,
hi,
and
Tosi.
I found it very useful, supportive for my work. So I've just become an academic manager, like just recently, and as soon as I become the manager and I had a chance to attend this course, and I found it's really helpful in my new position. So I learn a lot, and the thing I need to do, so it gives me like insight, a lot of insight. So I recommend, and it's very, I mean, like suitable for the new, the one who becomes an academic manager, so that it is really, really suitable. Yes. So you don't need to worry about that.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Chosu. Yeah, I think it's not a course for a new teacher, for someone who's just started teaching. It's for an experienced teacher, preferably a senior teacher who has some idea of what supervision and management involves. So yeah, I mean we've had people who are directors of schools, principals of schools, school owners, from different countries around the world. So quite a variety. So you get to meet and learn from those other people as well, which I think is really good.
And would it also be suitable for people who don't have schools on their own? Okay, people who are still teaching, but who are aspiring to become managers one time in the future.
Yeah, it's possible. With the course, though, all the assignments, there are 8 assignments, one for each module, and those assignments have to relate to your particular school environment or your particular role. And because it's a management course, the expectation from us as teachers on the course is that the assignments will be written based on the experience of the management of the school. So, for example, if we think about the finance module, which is probably the most difficult for especially for those who have no background in accountancy or management, it's a bit like, I suppose, Business 101. It's a basic it's a basic module in accounting, finance, budgeting, and so on. But it's helpful if you know something about the finances of your school, or you're able to talk to someone in your school who has that knowledge, so that you can use that within your assignment. Otherwise, it can be hypothetical. It can be actually invented if you're not able to get that information. But as I say, all the assignments are related to your own role and your own school. So it can have the assignments can have 2 benefits: one for your personal professional benefit, and the other for your school benefit. So yeah. So does that answer your question, Meme?
Thank you very much. And we have seen that in the advertisement for the forthcoming October course, there's one part scholarship. One part doesn't mean one seat. The scholarship for
No,
one person.
the one, I think the one shouldn't be there. It's just part scholarship. So we will give it. Actually, I did say I think I thought I'd put in actually. We will put in a reduction for a maximum of 2 people from Myanmar, as we did with the current course.
Any more questions from the audience, from teachers?
Sorry, I keep asking the questions. What are the requirements? A university degree, and what is the required English language level to attend the course? Sorry, I keep asking.
No. Preferably a bachelor's degree is minimum, but preferably a master's degree from Myanmar. An IELTS minimum of 7 or equivalent, IELTS equivalent, 7 equivalent. Yeah, otherwise I think it would be too taxing, too difficult. It requires a lot. It does require time, and I know when managers do it, principals do it, that sometimes they can't attend every session because they're away marketing or they've got meetings, important meetings, and so on to have. So and other times maybe an academic manager might be teaching, and so they can't maybe be involved in some of the online live sessions. So there's one live session per week only on Zoom, and everything else is done using Blackboard. That's the virtual learning platform, Blackboard, and it's run from the University of Queensland.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Lichas, do you have questions? Do you have any more questions?
Steve, I have a question. If I want to know more about this, where do I have to look for more information? Is there any page or the web page?
Yeah, the website. Yeah, the website. The website is very simple, idltum.org.
Okay, I will find it and I will share it here.
Yeah, I think I had it on the screen here actually. No, sorry, no, nothing's coming up. Okay, yeah, it's just www.idltum.org. There's another webinar actually on Thursday. My colleague Andy Hockley is giving a 1-hour session on Thursday at 7 o'clock Brisbane time. So that's about 3:30, I think, Myanmar time. There's only 100 places available, but he's going to be talking about well-being. So half an hour at a well-being talk, which is kind of a typical live session for the IDLTM course. It's not one that we do on the IDLTM. It's an extra one, but that's on Thursdays, and I think it's on the website. I put it on the website the other day. Yeah, thanks. Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, free webinar Thursday, October 7th. Yeah. Okay, good.
So any more questions from?
Well, you can always contact me if anyone has any questions. They want to contact me directly. There's an email on the website, and that's fine. Right now, for me, it's now Sunday, and I need to get up in the morning to go to church. So I probably should be going to bed fairly soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But thank you so much, all those who were able to join in. And I know that there were some difficulties perhaps with internet connections and Wi-Fi. But Jezebah, thank you.
Yes, Steve, yes. Thank you for sharing your invaluable insights and experience with us. your sessions on moving into ELT management provided both inspiration and practical guidance. Yeah. And also, we deeply appreciate the time to share your expertise and knowledge. So although you have late for your schedule.
Thank you very much. No, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And yes, I'm always very happy to talk, and I hope I'll see some of you in Myanmar in March, which will be
Yes, great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you so much from all
Yeah.
of us, from Myanmar
My
Teacher
pleasure.
and
My pleasure.
all the teachers. Yeah, thank you very much for today, and thank you very much. And we look forward to learning more from you on management from ELT. And okay, your insights and your experience are so valuable for us. Thank you so very much, Steve.
You're most welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you.